Okay, welcome back to episode 3 of Lismo Reads The Divine Comedy. Today I am joined by a very special guest, a good friend of mine whose name is Andrew. Andrew, do you want to give a little bit of an introduction for yourself?
Sure thing. Yep, nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I can say my credentials for reading Dante's Inferno is I know English. I've been speaking English for about 25 years now. Various literature classes throughout high school and college.
Awesome. Good to hear. Today we're going to be going through Cantos 6 through 8. And to give you guys a little bit of a summary of of what has happened so far in the Divine Comedy, Cantos 1 and 2, which I covered in episode 1. Dante woke up in a forest, and he was beginning a little bit of a journey here on in this forest. After getting through it, he's accosted by three animals: a leopard, a lion, and a she wolf. And the leopard represents lust, the lion represents pride, and the she wolf represents greed. I covered a couple of these things last episode, but I just wanted to give a brief summary for anybody new who's joining here. After he is accosted by these three animals. The character Virgil is introduced, and Virgil basically is this very thoughtful and wise guide to Dante throughout his journey and kind of helps Dante control his fears. In Canto number 2, most of this is detailing the character Beatrice, who's like Virgil, very kind and thoughtful, but she has more of a deific purpose and a sort of godly nature to her, as opposed to Virgil, who is a little bit more grounded in standard ethics, maybe is how I'll put that. So in Canto 3, they arrive at the gates of hell, to which they enter, and they are met with a crowd of damned souls who are suffering in agony because they worship neither God nor God's enemies. They meet the character Charon, who is ferrying these souls from where they are here to some sort of abyss, and he refuses to ferry Dante because Dante is a good soul, and Charon refuses to ferry a good soul. Okay, so in Canto 4, Dante and Virgil come across the souls in this next level of hell where people were not baptized. And included in this group are souls who existed before the time of Christianity. Virgil indicates that he actually was part of this group. While going through this level, they're accompanied by four famous poets. Of them is the famous Homer, who wrote the Odyssey, and there were three others who I believe were Horace, Lucan, and Ovid, if I'm not mistaken. The four poets accompany them to this castle that is surrounded by seven gates, and within the seven gates, at least within the first gate of them, is a group of intellectuals who are all gathered around, brooding and conversing with each other in this level of layer of hell. Amongst them are some very notable philosophers and mathematicians, such as Aristotle. Pythagoras was in there. There was some guy named Anaxagoras. The Canto 4 closes out with with darkness. I think the last line is, and after this was eternal darkness, something like that. Canto 5 starts out with them meeting this character Minos, who is kind of a demonic creature who has a tail. I think in the pictures I looked up, he's sort of goat like, very reminiscent of depictions of Satan. He judges the souls on this layer of hell by whipping his tail a number of times to indicate which layer of hell that these damned souls will be sent to. In this group, I think it was in this group or is directly after this group, they find a lot of historical women. They ended up in this layer of hell because of their sensuality or lustfulness. And amongst them is a character named Francesca, who Dante speaks with briefly. Francesca is actually a real life contemporary of Dante, as far as we know, who I guess he's using as symbolism for this character in his poem. Whilst reading one day with her lover, who she was out of wedlock with, they had a passionate moment that led to them sinning in the Christian ideal. For that, she ended up here in this level of hell that Dante is currently in. Just after she finishes telling Dante her story, Dante declares that he has been overtaken by a severe despair and the Canto V closes out with that. Okay, so before we get started on reading, I just want to ask Andrew if you had any thoughts so far on what we've read in the last, what we covered in the last two episodes. See, if there's anything you noticed, anything you picked up that you want to share here.
Sure. For me personally, I think episode 1 was a little more abstract, harder to comprehend. But episode 2, I found it to be a little more concrete. I enjoyed the descriptions of each of the levels. I found that very interesting,
Agree.
especially the philosophy level.
That was probably my favorite part so far, honestly. I don't know if you agree with this. I was thinking like I don't need to go to heaven. I could just go here. I could just hang out with these brilliant people and be
Yeah,
happy.
they didn't get it too bad.
Yeah, they weren't suffering. They were just hanging out and talking.
The other thing I noticed is that there's an interesting blend of almost Greek and Christian themes.
Yeah, it's like the Christian themes are very predominant, and you can tell so much of the poem is very like heavily religious, but you still see those Greek and Roman aspects throughout the work, which is cool because this was a time that I almost feel like it was before one of the Christian Enlightenment. So it was sort of as Roman and Greek gods were sort of out of the door, like paganism was losing popularity, and then you had Christianity, which was blowing up around this time. Without further ado, I think let's get started. Let's get reading. We're going to begin with Canto number 6 here. Yeah, so go ahead and get suited, get some coffee or some alcohol, or put some alcohol in some coffee and get comfortable, and let's go ahead and tackle Canto number 6.
When consciousness returned, after the darkening, caused by my pity for the two kinsfolk, which made me so sad that I was stunned, I saw then all around me fresh torments, and tormented spirits I had not seen before. As I moved on, turning this way and that, and looking, I was in the third circle where it rains. Eternally, icily, and implacably, weight and direction are invariable. Great hailstones, muddy water mixed with snow, fall through the darkened air without respite. They rot the ground they fall on, and it stinks. Cerberus, a cruel and outlandish beast, barks like a dog from its three throats at those who, under that downpour, are there submerged. His eyes are red, his beard greasy and black, his belly huge, and his fingers are clawed. He scratches the spirits, skins them, pulls them to bits. They howl like dogs, the rain so batters them, with nothing to shelter one flank but the other. The irreligious twist in their misery.
That's a lot of imagery we're getting here about Cerberus. This is pretty dark. I can already say this is the most metal level of hell I think we've gotten to yet.
Pretty metal. Saying that he is a dog, but the spirits he tears apart also howl like dogs. So
Some intentional relational descriptions there. And he's just pulling them to bits, and I feel like Dante does not hold back and just letting these uh letting these poor souls in I think might be the sixth layer of hell, just letting them have it.
is this what the level is, or is this what they have to pass through to get?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe Cerberus is like a gatekeeper in a sense.
Yeah, because I know in the Percy Jackson series, he is almost a
Love this
Hades
series.
guard dog to the further reaches they need to go to. They have to get past him.
He doesn't hold back here. This is like right at the beginning of the canto. He's like Cerberus is just ripping apart these people.
So this is after. So this is after he went through the immeasurable darkness or whatever.
Yeah. Yep. Oh,
Consciousness
so no,
returned.
actually, as the last canto ends, and he says he fell down. So he
Okay,
lost consciousness at the end of the last canto, and now he just woke up. He
another
woke.
level down.
So you want to continue, or actually, do you want me to continue? We'll
Yeah, you
rotate.
can take over the next one.
Here we go. Line 22. When Cerberus, the great dragon, saw us, he opened his mouths wide and showed his fangs. He shivered, and no part of him was still. My guide then stooped and opened his hands wide, gathered up earth, and then, his two fists full, he threw the lot down those rapacious throats, like a dog who barks when he wants food, and quietens when he gets his teeth into it, fighting and straining only in order to eat. So is it with the filthy muzzles of Cerberus, the demon who so battered the eardrums of those spirits that they would like to have been deaf if they could. We passed over the shadows which were beaten under the heavy rain. We put the soles of our feet down on the empty shapes which looked like bodies. They lay upon the ground, strewn here and there, all except one of them. who sat up quickly when he saw us passing not far from him. "Oh, you who are conducted through this hell," he said to me, "acknowledge me if you know me. You were full grown before I was unmade." I said to him, "The anguish which you suffer is perhaps such. You are not recognizable. At least it seems to me I never saw you. But tell me who you are, put in this place, which is so dreary that if perhaps other penalties are more severe, none could be more displeasing." He answered, "Your native city, which is full of envy, till it is bursting at the seams, was mine too, when I was in the open world. You citizens called me by the name of Chiaco, for the pernicious fault of gluttony. As you see now, the rain flattens me here. And I, unhappy spirit, am not alone. All these suffer the same penalty for the same fault." And then he said no more. I answered him, "Chiaco, your exhaustion and distress weigh on me heavily, and call up tears. But tell me, if you know, what will become of those citizens of the divided city? Will there be just one man? And tell me why it has been troubled by so much dissension." He said to me, "After an age of squabbles, they have come to bloodshed, and the provincial party will drive the other out and do it viciously. After which, that party is bound to fall within 3 summers, and the other come on top, with the help of one who keeps an ambiguous course. The other party will rule the roost for years, keeping its rival down with heavy exactions, however great the tears and indignation. There are two who are just, and no one listens to them. Pride and envy and avarice are the sparks which set the hearts of the people alight." We get a little bit more of a description of Cerberus here in the beginning, and then we meet one of Cerberus's victims, who is named Chiaco. There's a little bit more subtext I'm noticing, and I think here he's definitely throwing shade at probably the current Christian party of his timeline.
That could make sense.
We'll
So I'm
understand.
trying to understand. So Chaco's sin was gluttony, right?
Yeah. But the 52 and 3. "You citizens called me by the name of Chiaco for the pernicious fault of gluttony."
Does that mean everybody on this level is here for the sin of gluttony?
No, maybe?
It says all these suffer the same penalty for the same fault.
No, you're right.
Um,
Okay, so we're on a level of hell that is saved for those who are gluttonous.
but then why does he talk about the parties vying for power on the surface, like at the
Mm,
back on the earthly realm?
I'm guessing what he's getting at there is he's saying how gluttonous, so say take like a politician or say a
Right.
religious leader, for example, or anybody in a position of power who could be described as gluttonous, exploiting their power and this sort of creating rifts between certain political parties or governmental cabinets.
So
Uh,
is this taking gluttony as a more abstract concept rather than literally being eating too much food?
yeah, I don't think they're going to hell for eating too much food. I think
Is
it's
it the people in power usually have the ability to like gather more food, like more money, more food? They tend to be fatter. Like fatness was a sign of wealth at that time.
I think it all went hand in hand. Like nowadays, being fat does not equate to being wealthy, but back then it did. So like being gluttonous meant that you were rich, it meant that you were eating a lot, and it meant that you lacked self-control maybe. I don't know. That's more of a nowadays thing, but being overweight and being wealthy kind of went hand in hand. So, do you want to go ahead and continue?
With that, he ended his distressful utterance. I said to him, I should like further instruction, if you will be so good as to tell me more. Aranada and Teghayo were so excellent. Jacopo Rusticucci, Aligo, and Mosca, and the others who set their minds on doing well, tell me where they are now, that I may know them. For I have the greatest desire to understand. Does heaven delight them, or does hell embitter them? He said, they are among the blackest souls, for various faults have dragged them further down. If you go lower, you will be able to see them. But when you are once more in the sweet world, recall me to the memory of men. I say no more, expect no further answer. So this is interesting. People, they both knew, I'm assuming people in positions of power,
Mhm.
are not on that level. They are further down. They are among the blackest of all souls. So this is perhaps foreshadowing more sins later.
So I think Chiaco maybe is a lackey in this ladder of political corruption or
Oh,
religious corruption, and some of these guys like Jacopo and Arrigo and Mosca are all people who are above him and did worse than Chiako, and so they were going to be found later on. But that's a good catch.
His eyes, which had looked straight, were now askew. He looked at me a little, then bent his head, and fell with it among the other blind men. My guide said to me, "He will not wake again until he hears the sound of the angel's trumpet at the arrival of the enemy power. Each one will see once more his bitter grave, will put on once again his flesh and shape, will hear what echoes through eternity." Thus we passed through the filthy mixture of shadows and of rain, and with slow steps, talking a little about the future life. So I said to him, "Master, will these torments grow greater still after the great sentence? Will they be less or burn as they burn now?" His answer to me was, "Go back to your science, which teaches that the more perfect a thing is, the more it feels pleasure and pain as well. Although these people, because they are cursed, will never reach the point of true perfection, they expect to approach it more nearly afterward." We followed the road round a little further, talking of more things that I will repeat. And so we came to the place where it goes down. There we found Plutus, the great enemy.
That's foreboding.
So here they're talking what I think to be about Revelation.
It's interesting because I don't know when Dante is being satirical and when he's being serious. Or I don't know if I should interpret everything as serious or everything as satirical. He describes perfection as he says, which teaches that the more perfect a thing is, the more it feels pleasure and pain as well.
I cannot imagine that's what science at the time was about.
I think it's a pretty it's
It's
pretty common in most religions where sort of defining a religion starts at deciding what is perfect and like what is what is the golden standard. I think that's kind of what he's saying here. It's hard to say. This whole last canto is a lot more subtext. It's a lot more. I would say it's more deep. It's less concrete than what we saw before, like you said, and but it's giving me a lot to think about. I'll say that.
I, for one, on the side of science in this case.
I think so. Yeah, as with some of the recent cantos, I think I this whole stuff with like trying to be perfect. It's like I'm not going to try to be perfect. I just want to be a philosopher and I want to hang out in hell with the other philosophers. If I don't see heaven, so be it.
This
Yeah.
this line, 109, is baffling to me. Although these people, because they are cursed, will never reach the point of true perfection, they expect to approach it more nearly afterwards. Is that saying that?
I think I get it.
What is that saying?
I think what he's saying there is people don't expect to be perfect in life. They expect to be perfect in heaven. Does that sound right?
They That could be true. Yeah,
It,
they don't think to put in the effort to be
because
perfect in real
what
life.
does he mean? What is it when he says afterwards? What is he saying? After what?
Death.
Death.
It
Exactly.
must be. There we found Plutus, the great enemy. How foreboding.
That is for. I'm scared to see what
I'm
Plutus is
scared
all
of
about.
Plutus. Yeah. Cerberus was terrifying enough.
Canto number 7. Pape Satan. Pape Satan Alepe. Plutus began in his raucous voice. That wise and gentle man who knew everything replied to comfort me. Do not let fear deflect you now, for have what power he may, he will not stop you climbing down the rock. Then he swung around towards the swollen face and said, Be silent, you accursed wolf. Consume your inwardly with your rage. There is reason for this downward journey, for it is willed where the archangel Michael took revenge for that arrogant violation. As sails, when they are stretched out by the wind, wrap themselves in a heap when the mast breaks, so that cruel animal fell to the ground. So he went down the bank of the foul ditch, going a little further into the pit, which is stuffed with all evil of the universe. Justice of God! Who except you could gather as many pains and punishments as I saw? And why is our faults must so devour us? Just as the water does above Charybdis, breaking upon the current that it meets, so did these people in the circle of their dance. Here the biggest crowd had come together with great howls from one side and the other, and rolling heavy weights forward against their chests. So they struck one another as they met, and then turned round and rolling back again. Some shouted, Why hold on? Some, Why let go? So they flowed back around the dark circle from each side of us to meet on the other side, where once again they shouted their shameful chant.
So they entered further. They're down another level, correct?
Right. And then the Canto 7 begins with Plutus talking, and he's basically praising Satan. So it feels to me like things are sort of heating up here. Like there's
Mhm.
almost the last 6 cantos, there weren't really any stakes, but now it's like, okay, Dante's gotta, like, pull himself up by the bootstraps here.
I think line 19 here is interesting. It says, "Justice of God, who except you could gather as many pains and punishments as I saw? And why is it our faults must devour us so, or must so devour us?" So that's Dante, right, calling out to God.
Yeah,
Why do such pains and punishments exist, and why must you suffer them? It seems that the more he sees, the more he's beginning to crack.
agreed, and he's basically saying, like, I think after witnessing all of these people who he deems are like, "These are, like, innocent, nice people, why are they
People he
suffering?"
knew in his city.
He's starting to, like, it's starting to get to him, like you said, and he's, like, really questioning, I think, the system here.
Right.
Also, you're right before, so I looked it up, and Charybdis is a Greek monster, is a mythological monster. He's in one of the Percy Jackson movies, I think, maybe.
Oh,
He's
really?
the he's the monster that's, like, in the water and swirls up of a whirlpool and pulls it into his mouth.
Oh,
Yeah,
that monster is supposed to be
Pirates of the Caribbean.
no, at the exit of the Mediterranean where it meets the Atlantic Ocean, the Pillars
Oh,
of Hercules. I think that monster is supposed to guard people from like being able to leave the Mediterranean Sea. Because
like
I
you
think
said.
I think in real life there are actually violent currents there, so is fairly dangerous to cross through there, at least by sailing ship.
So it's turned into almost a mythical location.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I guess so many boats probably sank there over time, and then if you go beyond that, you probably die out on the ocean. So people maybe
Yeah.
assume that just disappear, get
Just
eaten.
as the water does above Charybdis, breaking upon the current that it means is. Okay, yeah, so he's basically
So they're
saying,
spinning. They're spinning in a whirlpool dance.
yeah, exactly. Circle of their dance. And he said this is the biggest crowd of howls and anguish essentially.
And they're bench pressing.
Yeah, it looks like it.
When the two troops had met, they both turned round, went back through the semicircle and met again. And I, who felt as if my heart were punctured, said, "My master, if you will, please indicate what people these are, and whether they were all clergymen, these tonsured ghosts on the left hand side." He answered, "The whole of them were cross eyed, so to speak, in their minds in their first life, and did not know how to spend moderately. You may know their voices, they may outcry enough. When they arrive at the 2 points of the circle, where their contrary faults set them at odds. Those were in the clergy who have nothing on top, in the way of hair, and popes and cardinals. They are the ones in whom avarice does its best." I said, "Master, among those who are like that, I certainly ought to recognize one or two who are befouled with evils of that kind."
So I think he said there that
Yeah.
this portion of the crowd are the top of the religious food chain, essentially. So the big spenders, they are the ones whom avarice does best, according to Dante, line
Is
48.
that the sin here?
Avarice, yeah. What is avarice is synonymous with greed, no?
I believe it's different. Greed is like hoarding money. This is almost reckless spending, especially if money it seems it didn't belong to them or it belonged to God.
I looked it up. Avarice, what the definition is, extreme greed for wealth or material gain.
Oh, okay. So it
So
is greed.
it's
Okay.
greed, okay, but no. So greed would also imply potentially like food, right? Or is that gluttony?
Um, I think that's gluttony. I think that's different. I think that's like gluttony is like the consumption versus like
Consumption versus collection or
avarice. Avarice, yeah, avarice is seems to be like
Smaug,
hoarding.
Lord of the
Smaug.
Rings. Line 52. He answered, "You are wasting your time to think of it. They saw nothing in life. They wallowed in muck, and now they are so brown you cannot recognize them. To all eternity they will run against each other. The one lot will arise out of their graves with fists clenched and the other with their hair cut off. Ill giving and ill keeping have taken from them the lovely world. Put them in this scrum. What it is like cannot be decently told. Now you can see, my son, how short a life have the gifts which are distributed by fortune, and for which people get rough with one another, so that all the gold there is beneath the moon and all there ever was could never give a moment's rest to one of these tired souls. Master, I said to him, now tell me also, this fortune that you spoke about just now, what is she, that has the world's good in her clutches? He answered, how foolish people are. How great is the ignorance which strikes them down? Now listen to me and take in what I say. He whose wise dispositions transcend everything made the heavens and gave intelligence to guide them, so that each part shines on the other parts, distributing the light with equalness. So is it with the splendors of the world. He put in place an agent and director, who at the proper time could change around vain possessions from one people to another, or between families, and no one could do a thing. So that one race should rule, another languish according to the judgment of that female, who is invisible as a snake in the grass. Your science cannot take account of her. She controls, takes decisions, executes them in her kingdom as other gods in theirs. Her permutations go on without truce. Necessity ensures that she is rapid, so you no sooner have a thing than you lose it. And this is she who is so crucified even by those who ought to praise her most. They blame her, but it is with nothing but defamation. But she is blessed, and she does not hear. With the other primal creatures, she is happy. She rules her kingdom and enjoys her blessedness. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
So I
Somebody,
I got a little lost there.
yeah, same.
Who is this she, and what is she personifying?
That is the question. There was some monologuing there. Your science cannot take account of her. Okay. So that's important. I think,
Dante represents a scientific, yet also religiously aware mind.
but I noticed, I'm sure you noticed this too. The fortune is spelled with a capital F, which is indicating that it is either like some sort of godly figure or it is just a very important entity in this story, I think.
Yeah, it seems to be the name of the personification of a worldly fortune.
Yeah, and okay, so fortune is who they personify as a she too. I'm only just connecting those dots.
I thought it was interesting how on line 70 there, where Virgil answers, "How foolish people are," with an exclamation mark. "How great is the ignorance which strikes them down." Now listen to me and take in what I say. He's almost a little short with Dante.
We could look at it from a very simple standpoint and assume that like fortune is something is what drives people to greed or to avarice, right? So
Yeah.
fortune could be something that is a motivator for people and it leads them to do things that are sinful. And I think in this specific text, like
It's interesting that they say, Virgil says, "Your science cannot take account of her. She controls, takes decisions, executes them in her kingdom as other gods in theirs." So they didn't have the best idea of economics at the time, but also economics is an inexact science at the same. I wonder what their ideas of economics were at the time.
necessity ensures that she is rapid. So you no sooner have a thing than you lose it. Is this like a reference to the liquidity of people's material belongings?
Maybe that most people, as soon as they gain a fortune, would lose it quite rapidly. Now let's go down where there is more cause for pity. Already the stars are sinking, which were rising when I set out, and dawdling is forbidden. We crossed the circle to the other bank, above a spring which boiled and flowed away, through a concavity which it had made. The water is more nearly black than blue, and we, in company with that dark stream, went further down, following a difficult path. It goes into the marsh which is called Styx, that sad brooklet when it has tumbled down to the bottom of a long, gray sloping hill. And I, who stood there looking down intently, saw people covered in mud there in the swamp, all naked and with anger in their faces. They struck each other, not only with their hands, but with their heads and chests and with their feet, biting each other to pieces bit by bit. Master said, "Son, now you see the spirits of those who are overpowered by anger. And I would also like you to understand that underneath the water, people are sighing. It is they who make the water bubble on top, as you can see, whichever way you turn. Stuck in the slime, they say, 'We chose to be sad, in the sweet air enlivened by the sun, and our hearts smoldered with a sullen smoke. Now we are sad instead in this black filth.' That is the hymn they gurgle in their throats, and cannot even get the words out properly. So we described a long arc round the bank, of that stinking pool between the dry and the soft, with our eyes turned towards those who were swallowing the mud. And so we came to the foot of a tower at last." So
What?
already it seems they passed through another level. Another level.
See, I'll say this, and this goes for everything we've accounted so far in the series, episode 1 and 2. it's not always super clear when we're leaving one level to go to another. And that might just be my own that might be my own issue. Like maybe it is more clear and I'm just missing it. But I honestly don't know here if we're going to another level or if this whole canto was the same level. Does he indicate it at any point that they're going down a level?
Yeah, they said they moved forwards.
Went further down following a difficult path. Oh, so is this the river Styx?
It seems to be the marsh
Marsh, which is called
where it ends and disperses. I'm not
So,
sure.
are you familiar with the river assuming it's the same thing, are you familiar with the river Styx?
Yes, I believe isn't that what you have to cross to get into hell?
Yeah,
Like, isn't that
and
what Chiron was ferrying people across?
so I don't know that
Or
Charon was ferrying the people across the river. It's possible that the river Styx goes all the way down from at the top, this upper level where he is, down to where Dante and Virgil currently are. But I don't know that it is necessarily where it's only where Charon is. Because he says they say here that's the marsh which is called Styx. And what I do know is that in the river Styx, or I guess in this case the marsh, if you touch the water or if you submerge yourself for long enough in it, you forget everything or that you're eternally youthful. I'm going to double check that right now.
was I believe Achilles was dipped in the river Styx to become invincible.
Also, my computer is totally listening to me because I typed RIV and River Styx came up.
No way.
Actually, it's probably not listening to me. It's probably just taken in all the information from the last 30 searches I've done, which are all related to Dante's
Do
Inferno.
you have Marvel Rivals installed?
I do.
It's Chinese spyware.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. In Greek mythology, Styx, also called the river Styx, is a goddess and one of the rivers of the Greek underworld. Okay, so it's also man, dude, the Greek mythology is so deep here, and I have a sort of imposter syndrome when I do these because when I start to like over the course of reading get a grasp for how sprawling the Greek mythology landscape is. Also, that's not even counting for Christianity, which I'm not very learned in. I am like, I'm like, what am I doing right now? And I have to remind myself that the whole point of this series is for somebody who's maybe not so learned in this thing to jump in and like interpret it from like a completely fresh outsider's perspective. So I have to reel myself back in here because like I'm
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. Like I'm vaguely familiar with these names and
yeah.
concepts and stories.
Most of my knowledge with this comes from Percy Jackson, which
Exactly.
I'm not ashamed to admit
Exactly.
that. So,
I
um,
think I know a little bit more about Christian theology, but not a lot more.
I feel like I might know more about Greek mythology than Christian mythology. I just looked it up and I confirmed that Charon was the ferryman who carried the souls of the dead across the river Styx. So you
Right.
were right before.
Okay.
Now what's confusing about that to me is Charon was back in Canto number 3, if I'm not
So
mistaken.
what I'm wondering is like, are they seeing like the marsh where the river ends and it disperses?
So Canto 6 begins with a description of Cerberus, who's a mythological and or sorry, Greek and mythological figure who's like a dog dragon. He's described here as a dragon, but I know him as a
With
three-headed
three
dog.
heads.
Three
Yeah,
heads,
three
yeah.
heads.
He's tearing people up, and after that, Dante comes across this man named Chiaco, who is still in physical condition enough to give sort of a monologue to Dante and explain some of what's going on here on this level. And then Canto 7. Do you want to talk about Canto 7? Canto? I don't know. I actually don't know.
In Canto 7, we hear Plutus hailing Satan, essentially. And Virgil says to Dante not to pay any mind to him. So they see dancing circles of people spinning and spiraling like a whirlpool, just as the waters of Charybdis. And their sin is said to be avarice or greed. So Virgil gives a long monologue personifying fortune to Dante. And then they eventually make their way forwards, perhaps to another level where they come across the marsh or brooklet called the River Styx from Greek mythology.
Okay, so they're on the marsh, which is called Styx. They come across a pretty much a group covered in mud, and they're all swinging at each other with their arms and legs, and it looks like they're even headbutting each other. There's a line here. Line 121 says, "Stuck in the slime, they say, we chose to be sad in the sweet air and live enlivened by the sun, and our hearts smoldered with the sullen smoke." So these people chose to be sad. There's a level of of
Or
complacency.
angry.
Yeah, it's like there's a level of complacency with this current group here. Basically, Dante just describes coming going through this group of people who are covered in mud and acting like degenerates, and then he ends the canto with, "And so we came to the foot of a tower at last."
So I noticed at the beginning, Dante almost still has hope for the people stuck in hell. I believe he asks Virgil if they will be made to suffer like this forever, or if once the presumably revelation comes that they might be freed and eventually go to heaven. But as time goes on, as they descend to each of these levels, seems to me that he loses almost hope for them. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I agree, and Virgil at one point almost seems like he's starting to not lose patience with Dante, but he's starting to get this sense of severe. There's a sense of severity in his voice that we don't see before. Like the stuff going on is a little bit more like it, he not necessarily that he doesn't feel less bad for these souls, but that he almost feels more like he has to protect or shield Dante from a lot of what he's experiencing. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, may I quote Virgil on in Canto VII, line 73, he says, "Now listen to me and take in what I say." He's he's knocking sense into Dante.
Mhm.
I agreed, like he is not as, I guess, friendly in this scenario because he wants to make sure the severity maybe comes across to Dante.
Right.
This isn't by accident that they're here.
I like that interpretation. Alrighty. So that'll wrap up this episode. I'm gonna keep the post reading summary pretty short to save it for the next episode. I just want to say a quick thanks to our guest, Mr. Andrew here. Thank you for taking
Of
your
course.
time and joining us on this fun reading expedition that's proving to be a little bit of a challenge for me. Maybe
You
it was.
know, honestly, this is probably one of the best, I would say top 5 YouTube shows I've been on, so
Oh, okay. That's pretty good.
good
That's pretty good. I'll take
experience.
that. Awesome. Before I end this video, is there any wise words you want to leave us off with to kind of that summarize maybe the vibe of what we read today?
I would say don't sin, 'cause sin bites you in the ass when you die.
Yeah.
Cerberus bites you in the ass when you die.
Rip you to
Tear you
shreds
to yeah, peel you
accordingly.
to shreds.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and make sure to tune in next time for Cantos 8 through 10. Take care and bye bye.
Aranada and Teg Tegyayo.
That's a tough one.
Teg Yayo. Tegyayo.
I like it.
Tegayo. Teg Yayo. Das Jacopo
Got some names.
Jacopo Rusticucci.
Hold on, I need more mead.